Janine is saying that she loves the idea of co-designing job duties. And Kirk, of course, is saying that we're supposed to be pointy.
We are supposed to be pointy. I love the points. And man, we need to kill the message that we need to file those back. We need to be pointier than ever. People are relying on us. I don't know the gift that you have, but I know somebody needs it. It might be me. So don't keep me waiting too long. So let's talk about these voices that get in the way of us fulfilling or revealing even that terrifying longing. You are the world's most foremost expert on your own taste. That's right. So I think of it, the voice is like a triangle. And here's the good news. The triangle is three-pointed, talking of points. So we have three voices. Two of them come from us, and one of them comes from outside. So the voice that comes from outside is the voice of culture, whatever culture we're part of, whatever culture we're raised in. In Western culture, I can speak to that because that's the culture I've been in. In the culture of being a woman, I can speak to that because that's part of my culture too. I can speak to the culture of coming from a very conservative family where everybody gets married young and has kids young, and pretty much like that's your destiny. That's your terrifying longing, right? And that is not my terrifying longing. And I'm okay with that. I used to be very uncomfortable with being the standout, but I no longer am because it's allowed me to discover such joy and purpose in my own life. So you've got these voices, right, that come from the outside, the shoulds. You can think about those. How many shoulds do you have in your life? Who are those significant voices? Maybe it's a role model you look up to, parents, friends who you deem as successful, people that say this is the way you should do it because this is how it's done. I don't believe in that, by the way. Clearly, I don't believe in that. I believe that you decide how it's done for you, and there's nobody who can tell you no but you. So that's one of the voices, comes from society, culture, the shoulds. The other two voices come from you, and that's what we're going to break down today, because those are the two voices you need to become intimately familiar with in your own mind, because they're the ones that you respond to, and you get to decide which ones you respond to. And we often confuse them, and so I'm here to set the record straight for us today. One of those voices is the toxic narratives. If I were to ask you to tell me some of the toxic narratives that you have about yourself, in particular, toxic narratives that come up in response to adversity. So in your job search, for example, in a relationship challenge, in a friendship situation, in a financial crisis, what are some of the, I'm sorry, I totally just got sidetracked by this super funny comment. Normal is just a setting on the dryer. That's right. I love that. Okay, so the toxic narratives. Can we put some of those in the chat? What are some of the toxic narratives that have come up for you? And then we're going to talk about the defining characteristics of a toxic narrative and what I believe we confuse them as, what we've been taught to confuse them as. So to be happy, get married, and have some kids. My mother is one toxic narrative that caused me much pain. Okay, let me ask a question. So that's the idea, right? To be happy, get married, have some kids. But what's the narrative if you're not doing those things? What's the narrative about you that comes up? That would be my question. And Kirk, you don't need to write that there if you don't want to, but this is what I'm getting at. So a narrative that is toxic is one that is in response to the voice outside. So that other point on the triangle, the voice outside, the shoulds, the examples that we have, the paths that have been set before us, they're all shoulds. The toxic narrative is a judgment in response to that if I am not measuring up to that should. So it typically comes up in the face of adversity. So for example, for me, I failed out of college the first time. So I was 17 and I was a music major. I wasn't ready for school. I was ready to party, have fun, be social. Yeah. And I left that year, not my proudest moment, but also my proudest moment. depending on how you look at it. I left that year, I dropped out, and I had a point, it's laughable. I had a 0.78 GPA. Okay. My brother was this honors student. He was like, on the fast track. He had gone to governor's school. He did all of this stuff. And here I was, the failure of the family. That was the toxic narrative that I adopted because I wasn't following in the path of the shoulds that I believed were expected of me. By the way, this is something else important for you to know. Until you have those conversations with people, very often the shoulds are contrived. Sometimes they're outright. Sometimes people will tell you, this is what you must do to be successful. This is what you have to do. But sometimes they're subsumed. They're never spoken, right? And sometimes they're assumed and they're our own creation. So here's one from Anu. I am not a brave person. Oh, yes. I'm not a brave person, fearful and scared. I am not living up to my full potential. Right. That is a toxic narrative. I am not a brave person. So Anu, we're going to turn that around today because that's a toxic narrative that you have the power. You don't have the power to shut it off, but you have the power to not listen. That's the difference. So on this triangle of voices that inform us, that inform our ability to get to our terrifying longing, we have the outside voices that, we're going to hear them all the time. We can choose to turn down the noise, turn down the volume, not scroll through social media, not look at those things that make us feel less than, like we should be doing that. Christine, why did you even try? Oh my gosh, you guys are so good at this. Yes, we all have these deep, yes, Renee says you are not smart enough. We all have these deep seated, and if you look back, I guarantee you, for me, mine has been, it doesn't matter what I do, I'm not going to measure up. I'm a failure. I don't have what it takes. And I look back, you'll never be an intellectual. Yes. So I just watched an episode of Chopped today, this morning. One of my favorite shows to watch. And one of the contestants said, I'm just a guy from Coney Island. Nobody has high expectations of me. And that was his should. That was his toxic narrative, that there's nothing really to live up to. So we all have them. And what's important for you to understand is that you're already acutely aware of them. The purpose of this exercise is not to draw your attention further to them, but to help you understand that that voice is the voice of a toxic narrative. It is not the voice of the other voice that you control, which is your inner critic. So many times, yes.
I was just going to say, Renee has said, now feeling it's too late, you are too old.
Yes. Yes. You're like reading my mind on one of my note cards here. You can't see, but I have written like, it's too late. It just doesn't matter. So speaking to that really quickly, because I'm a wealth of motivational information that's true, and I love to share when that moment is inspired. Several people, you guys have seen these memes and these stories, I'm sure, of people who never got their start because they spent years stripping away the toxic narratives. They never revealed their terrifying longing until their 40s, 50s, 60s, and in some cases, the 70s. So it is not too late. We know this. Some people never even get their start until they're in their 50s or 60s. It is the rare bird who knows exactly what I want and I'm not going to care. And I say bird because they're usually the odd bird, right? Like people look at them as odd, and they have just learned very early on not to care about the shoulds, not to listen to that other voice. And I have spent too many years of my life listening. I am now in my mid to late 40s. Okay, I'm going to go with mid to late 40s. And I am just now discovering and longing for and walking toward that terrifying longing, because I've decided to strip away all of the garbage, all of those voices from outside, from society, from culture, from my parents, from people who love me dearly. You guys, you have to understand this, that the shoulds come from people who want to keep you safe, not from people who want to keep you down. The unfortunate thing is that Safety does keep you from the risk of achieving your terrifying longing. And we've grown too comfortable, particularly again in Western culture, with being safe, with being comfortable. And comfortable things die. That's why we feel lost. It's why we feel a lack of motivation. It's why we don't have the energy, because we think we're supposed to be seeking comfort.